Okay, so now it's all right. Now the short story, as I told you, really, it's a very good reference to really the idea of naturalism, and to see how man is sometimes fated and destined, and there's no way you can change that. And in addition to all of this is the real clash between instincts, the real clash between your own if you like thinking and your instincts. And sometimes the idea that no matter how wise you can be, no matter how old or old-aged or wise you could be, you could still make mistakes, and you could still commit really mistakes that would which would lead to your destruction. And the story here really is exactly that, how man really faces and challenges and does so many things to prove himself, if you like, but ultimately nature wins. Nature wins, and you could never really overcome this, and you could never beat really nature or natural elements in reality. So the question of the instincts and the what is more powerful, is nature and instincts, or your own sort of thinking that you are a powerful man, you are a powerful figure. But really it seems that here this story is telling us that this question of really instinct is more powerful. Nature is more powerful and will always dominate and will control things in reality. And the question here really is shown is in the way the dog in this journey was able to survive, and the dog knew that this is not a good time to travel, to face the outside world in such a horrible condition is very dangerous and is impossible. A dog, an animal would not do that. Man does it. And this is really the idea that man was wrong and he was dead. Animal was correct here and it saved itself. And really this is the idea to say about the clashes, the real clashes, how much man thinks that he is in control of things. But really man is weak. Man is weak. Human beings, creatures on earth generally are weak creatures, no matter how tough and how strong they could be, and they think they are, and they think they pretend to be, but it's not out of proportion, and it's not going to outlast. And really this is the idea here in a very good way. Now notice the next on the next page, in the middle, page 2 of this short story, where we see the first idea here about the man going out with his dog, and the way you can see how he was traveling. Of course, the way he was mitten everywhere and trying to keep himself warm, and the way he wanted to walk and so on. Notice, at the man's heels trotted a dog, a big native husky, the proper wolf dog, gray-coated and without any visible or temperamental difference from its brother, the wild wolf. The wild wolf. The animal was depressed by the tremendous cold. It knew that it was no time for traveling. Its instinct told it a truer tale than the one, or than was told to the man by the man's judgment. You see, this is exactly what I was saying. The instinct of the animal, tells him this is not the time to travel. It's bad time to travel. as you can see, the dog knew that it was no time for traveling. Its instinct told it that this is not the time. And the dog's tail, I mean, the story, the way his instincts, dictated to him, told him a better story than a man's own instincts or judgments. And this is what he means here, to the man by the man's judgment. And I think this is true. And later on, as we shall see, that sometimes, yes, sometimes animal instinct is more powerful than man's instinct. And I think there is a very lovely story. Really, there is a real story I knew from Saudi. I was told a real story. You know the road. Have you ever been to the road between anybody visited Mecca?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes,
Good.
doctor.
Did you drive from Mecca to Taif? Anybody drove by car from Mecca to Taif?
Yes.
Anybody? You did? Did you go through the really very zigzag way in the Al-Hada area?
Yes, doctor.
You did. When was that?
I think before 2 years.
Oh, 2 years back.
Yes.
Anybody told you about the story of this road?
No.
Yeah, because I lived in Taif myself. I lived in Taif for 15 years. And many people told me things. And the road between the same road in this area called Al-Hada area, which is a very mountainous, like people driving here in your country here in Oman to drive up to the Jabal Akhdar. I have not been there, but people told me, or Jabal Shams, or I don't know what. And they said it's very dangerous to climb up the mountain. And they say in that road, they say the way they built that road, originally they didn't know how to build it, but they say that in the past, people, shepherds and people who attend their goats and donkeys and animals, mainly goats and sheep. And they said they followed a donkey, the way the donkey went up to that mountain, they built the road according to where the donkey walked. And that's why it's called, really, they call it Tariq al-Qurr. Al-Zahra. Did you stop before climbing up the mountain? There is a mosque there, and there's a station, and there is a nice mini market and all this area. Even the mosque is called Masjid al-Qurr, Tariq al-Qurr, Mahattat al-Qurr, and everything called here, this area. Before you begin climbing up, it's called al-Qurr. Why? Because it's the donkey. And they said, why do you call it al-Qurr? Because I asked, why do you say al-Qurr here? And they said, because they used a donkey to lead the way up in that mountain, to tell them where exactly the best way to go up, which is really amazing. Do you understand? So the people there, they depended on the donkey to lead them, to tell them where is the best way to go, which is really, to me, is funny and is amazing. And here, really, the question about instincts. So by looking at the mountain, the people didn't know where exactly. It's funny, but this is what they say. I don't know if this is true, But that's the story they said. That's why they called this area. And it's funny, really, the whole area down at the bottom of the mountain, they call it, the whole area, they call it Al-Qur, which is the donkey, you know, which is really amazing. They say they depended on this. And this is it, you know. The dog here in the story knew that, you know, if he was able to tell his owner, don't travel, you know, he couldn't say it. And this is really the writer wants to say, that man makes mistakes, animals don't. Man makes mistakes, animals don't. You know, this is the idea. It's really funny, but this is it. You know, I don't know if we believe this, but this is what the writer is saying, if you like, about this question. Notice, in reality, it was not merely colder than 50 below zero. It was colder than 60 below, than merely 70, you know. It was 75 below zero. Since the freezing point in 32 above zero, it meant that 107 degrees of frost. The dog didn't know anything about temperatures or about thermometers. You see, this is it again, to go back to the dog and the contrast between dogs and man. The dog did not know anything about thermometers. Possibly in its brain there was no sharp consciousness of a condition of very cold, such as was in the man's brain. Again, this is to contrast brain animal, or animal brain, and the human brain. But he said, but the brute had its instinct. ولكن هذه البهيمة ولكن لهذه البهيمة or لكن لهذه البهيمة فطرة. Really, this is the idea. And notice he said bahima, the brute, as if to say, you man, you are a human, you are not a brute. Okay? As I said, really, this is a lovely paragraph, as you can see here. I'm saying, because that's the end, at the end of the day, really, that's the clash here, and what I'm saying about nature and naturalism and fatalism in a sense. It experienced a vague but managing apprehension that subdued it and made it slink about along at the man's heels. And that made it question eagerly every unwanted movement of the man, as if expecting him to go into camp to seek shelter somewhere and build a fire. So here the dog immediately thought, its instinct made him follow the man, thinking that this man is going to a camp, or this man is walking in this cold to find shelter, and it wants to build a fire. The dog had learned fire. The dog had learned fire, and it wanted fire, or else to burrow under the snow, or else to burrow under the snow and cuddle its warmth away from the air. Yeah, I think, you know, it's really amazing again. The idea here that the dog knows, he said, the dog knows that it should keep itself warm. And he said dogs knew about the effect of fire. They knew what fire really means here. It warms your body. Otherwise, he said, it should burrow. You know, burrow means to dig a deep hole in the ground, to cover itself and maybe to find warmth. Again, notice here, to cuddle and cuddle, you know, its warmth away from the air, because the air is so cold that you need to protect yourself, your skin, your body. As if to say, you know, this dog knew exactly the conditions, but the man did not. The frozen moisture of its breathing had settled on its fur in a fine powder of frost, and especially where its jowls, muzzle, and eyelashes whitened by crystal breath. The man's red beard and mustache were likewise frosted, but were solidly and deposit, taking the form of ice and increasing with every warm, moist breath he exhaled. Also, the man was chewing tobacco, and the muzzle of ice held his lips so rigidly that it was unable to clear his chin when he expelled the juice. The result was that a crystal beard of the color and solidity of amber was increasing its length on its chin. If he fell down, it would shatter itself like glass into brittle fragments. But he did not mind the appendage. It was the penalty all tobacco chewers paid in that country. And he had been out before in 2 cold snaps. They had not been so cold as this, he knew. But by the spirit thermometer at 60 miles, he knew they had been registered at 50 below and at 55. Now, you can see a lot of really details here. Exactly, because you could see how much writer really gave us details about all these elements of freezing cold and what he's doing and so on, and comparing, the outside natural elements and the man's, behavior towards facing this terrible cold. He held on through the level stretch of woods for several miles. So this man went on walking and walking and on, and the dog was following him. Crossed a wide flat of rigger heads and dropped down a bank to the frozen bed of a small stream. So he reached a little stream, but it's frozen, as you can see here. The bank of a frozen bed of a small stream. This was Henderson Creek, small, tiny river. A tiny river. Normally, small rivers are called creeks, a creek. And he knew he was 10 miles from the forks. He looked at his watch. It was 10 o'clock. He was making 4 miles an hour, and he calculated that he would arrive at the forks at 12:30. He decided to accelerate that event by eating his lunch there. So again, you can see here how the narrator is telling us, as you can see, the third person narrator telling us, the details, how this man is going to, move ahead and to walk quickly and quicker to reach the place where he was going to, right? And to, of course, save himself from this terrible weather. The dog dropped in again at his heels with a tail drooping discouragement. As the man swung along the creek bed, the furrow of the old sled trail was plainly visible, but a dozen inches of snow covered the marks of the last runners. Again, notice most of the time we see the dog is not happy, as if to say to its owner, please go back, because he wants to say, please go back, because that's not the time for travel, And of course, as you can see, it's really, always here the contrast to say, well, this man is crazy to have decided to go at this time. So notice he was not much given to thinking, and just then particularly he had nothing to think about saving, or save that he would eat lunch at the folks, and that at 6 o'clock he would be in the camp or in camp with the boys. So here we learn quickly that he's traveling and he wants to join some people in a camp, and his friends, some friends, he is going to join them in that camp. And really, as if to say, this is an impossible journey he's taking. There was nobody to talk to. You know, again here, the narrator suggests the question of you know, isolation and really segregation here. Nobody to talk to, and there has been speech, and had there been speech, would have been impossible because of the ice muzzle on his mouth. So he continued monotonously to chew tobacco. You see, this is again the question of routine, and if you like, really as a form of exercise, not to die of freeze, really. So again, the word monotonously here, the monotonously, which is the routine, killing, if you like, routine thing, if you like, really to suggest his misery and isolation and loneliness in this journey, which is very difficult and very dangerous. Again, in the next chapters and chapters and chapters, you see him really, he was always thinking that this is really very, very bad idea he really had made. Notice here, the next paragraph used the word, the thought retarded itself. The thought retarded itself. As if to say, you know, he really was, you know, most of the time later on, of course, he started complaining and blaming himself, saying that he was wrong. Again, the very cold, notice, it was very cold, and that he had never experienced such cold. You see, this is it. When you have no experience, you have not tried it this time or like this time. So why do you venture? Why do you venture and kill yourself? And you know, this is how the narrator is saying, you have to have the experience to make sure that you can do it. And really, this is the idea again about knowledge and about experience and about instinct and about the importance of consulting people and listening to people, listening to your instincts, listening to your neighbors, listening here in the story to your dog. Really, at the end of this paragraph, you know, when he was saying here, notice, but it didn't matter much after all. What were frosted cheeks? A bit painful? That was all. They were never serious. You know, trying to convince himself, maybe if he gets some kind of frozen cheeks or frozen hands, you know, they can be easily defrosted later, and they can be easily warmed up a little bit, and then you'll be fine. But again, when you get your hands frozen, you know, or you get something, your cheek or whatever, then you will be in danger. Okay? So again, the next paragraph again said the same thing. His mind was empty of thought, as if to say he was stupid. He never really thought carefully and listened to people carefully. Notice the boy here, the man said he was, when we say the man's empty, I repeat in this second paragraph, empty as the man's mind was of thought and he keenly observant. So he was keenly observant, and he noticed the changes in the creeks, the curves and bends and the timber jams, and always he sharply noted where he placed his feet. Once coming around a bend, he sheeled abruptly like a started horse, curved away from the place where he had been walking, and retreated several paces back along the trail. The creek, he knew, was frozen clear at the bottom. No creek could contain water in that Arctic winter. You know, so the idea that this weather was absolutely terrible and cold, so you could see the bottom or the bed of the water, the bed of the river. You could see that the depth and the length and so on of the water itself, but it's all ice now. It's all ice. And he's saying, no wonder, because this is Arctic weather, very terrible weather. Anyway, he could see more and more of this, and he was in such panic. Again, notice here in the next paragraph, he used the word panic. He started to panic, and I think this is really important. Let me again show you where I'm highlighting, because I was worried that maybe you can't maybe hear me, or we lost connection or something. No. Are you okay? You can follow me, correct? Look here, the word again, the I think keyword, which is panic, because he was at some point later, of course, he was really he was in a way half conscious that he's going to maybe lose his life or something, or he started to be frightened. And that's why here really the question of panic started to creep into his body. He had felt the give under his feet and heard the crackle of a snow-hidden ice skin. And to get his feet wet in such a temperature meant trouble and danger. At the very last, it meant delay, for he would be forced to stop and build a fire. Again, here we come back to the idea, of course, which is the main idea in the story, which is, as you can see, to build a fire. Meaning, if you really get frozen and get cold, absolutely frozen, especially in your feet, he said, especially if you get it wet and frozen, so you can't go on walking. So you really need to build a fire in this terrible weather. How can you find dry stuff to build a fire? Again, this is to say about the question of nature and how to face nature and how to face outside danger, because you have to know and you have to have experience of facing nature and how to build a fire, where to build a fire, and how, as we say, really about how to protect your fire. If you start your fire, you want your fire to go on and to warm you up. Really, that's the idea. So he started feeling very cold, and he started to rub his nose and cheeks, as you can see, then skirted to the left, stepping gingerly and teasing the footing for each step. Once clear of the danger, he took a fresh chew of tobacco and swung along at his 4-mile gait. So again, he's still having a lot of challenges to face, because he's decided, and that's really the question. So determined, to be determined, completely determined and crazy about single-mindedness or about stubbornness really is not the answer. Stubbornness or being stubborn is not the answer. Being courageous is not the answer, really. The idea here, this will not help you. In the next Notice, next 2 hours he came upon several similar traps. Again, notice here, traps. So in his way, as if to say he was always falling into traps, into more and more and more trouble and more danger. Usually the snow above the hidden pools had a sunken, candid, appearance that advertised the danger. Once again, however, he had a close call, and once suspecting danger, he compelled the dog to go on in. This is it. This is it. To ask the dog to walk ahead of him, to lead him the way. This is our story in Saudi, the donkey. To ask the donkey to walk ahead, to lead the way. And here he asked the dog to walk in front of him to lead the way. What a funny thing. The dog did not want to go. The dog did not want to go. It hung back until the man shoved it forward, as if to kick it. And then it went quickly across the white. You see, again, really here we say that the dog is wiser and did not want to walk ahead because it knows that this is really terrible thing and very dangerous, and the dog doesn't like it. That's why, asking the dog to, again, not asking, but he said compel, to force the dog to walk in front. And the dog did not want to. Suddenly it broke through, floundered to one side and got away to firmer footing. It had wet its forefeet and legs, and almost immediately the water that clung to it turned to ice. It made quickly efforts to lick the ice off its legs, then dropped down in snow and began to bite out the ice that had formed between the toes. Notice here the behavior of the dog. Again here to see how the dog is wise to clean itself from the snow, because he said, if the dog let this snow into or in his feet or on and between his toes, then he could get frozen. And that's why, it's saying here, the word it means the dog started to clean itself in so many amazing things. Again, really the word here, which is important, this was a matter of instinct. This was a matter of instinct, meaning that dog knew what to do to save itself. To permit the ice to remain would mean sore feet. It did not know this. It merely obeyed the mysterious prompting that arose from the deep crypts of its being. This is really amazing thing to say. Meaning the dog deep down in its body, it knew that what's behaving and what it is doing, the dog knew that this is the correct thing. And that's what we say, mysterious. And again, the cryptic or the crypts means the deep, unbelievable hidden areas in your mind, in your body, knew that this is wrong or this is correct. But the man knew, having achieved a judgment on the subject, and he removed the mitten from his right hand and helped tear out the ice particles. He didn't expose his fingers more than a minute and was astonished that at the swift numbness that smote them. It certainly was cold. He pulled on the mitten hastily, and beat the hands savagely across his chest. You see, so here the idea that the man really tried to help the dog to clear itself from the snow, but then immediately his hands, meaning the man's hands, immediately get frozen, and he started really to worry. And you go on and on and on. And I think I don't know if I'm going to read all this for you, because I want to check where he wanted to build the fire, because really is every line here. I said to you, please read everything, but maybe again here, notice the next paragraph. Notice, when the man had finished, he filled his pipe and took his comfortable time over a smoke. Then he pulled on his mittens, settled on ear flaps on his cap firmly about his ears, and took the creek trail up the left fork. The dog was disappointed and yearned back toward fire. You see, the man, as you can see here, that or the boy or the man, he did not yet build a fire. The dog was hoping that he would build a fire, or would hope that he wanted to go back, because it's very terrible cold. The dog was disappointed and yearned back toward the fire. This man didn't know cold. Possibly all the generations of his ancestry had been ignorant of cold, of real cold, of cold 107 degrees below freezing point. Well, again, this is really interesting, because this man, they say, or the narrator here is saying, that this man had no idea. He had no idea, no experience of cold, and even his family, his ancestry, his people also didn't know. They were ignorant about that. So that's why he was completely ignorant about this, and he was a challenger. In a sense, in his own eyes, he was a challenger. But the dog, he said, the dog knew. But the dog knew. All its ancestry knew. Again, notice here really the funny, the funny really comparison between the dog or between man and animal. As if to say that the animal is more knowledgeable. The animal is more knowledgeable than man. And it had inherited the knowledge, and it knew that it was not good to walk around abroad in such fearful cold. It was the time to lie snug in a hole in the snow and wait for a curtain of cloud to be drawn across the face of outer space whence this cold came. On the other hand, there was no keen intimacy toward dog. On the other hand, there was no keen intimacy between the dog and the man. Sorry. Now, really here to say that, as if to say that these people, or this man and his dog, as if to say that there's no real communication. As if the dog failed to tell his owner, come on, come back, this is wrong. Right? As if to say the dog is not, or was not able to convey this message. Interesting here. Notice, I think the writer really made it clearly. There was no keen intimacy between the dog and the man. The one was the toil slave of the other, and the only caresses it had ever received were the caresses of the whiplash and of the harsh and menacing throat sounds that threatened the whiplash. What a shame. The narrator is saying there was no real love relationship or real understanding between the dog owner, because as if to say that the owner was using this dog as his slave, and there was no real compassion between a slave and a master. That's when he said the only caresses. Caresses means to caress someone, to hold someone, to pat on someone, to cuddle someone, to love someone. And he said there was no love between there was no real friendship between the man and this dog, because it's his dog. And the man here, or the narrator, is saying that there was no relationship between this man and the dog. It was only a slave master relation. Again, here to say this man is terrible. So the dog made no effort to communicate its apprehension to the man. You see, the dog could not talk to his man and tell him, please, let's go back. You see, the dog could not speak. Notice, the dog made no effort to communicate its apprehension to the man. Boys, my friends here, boys. Where is Ismail? Ismail? Do we have Ismail here today? Where is he? Oh, maybe he's not here today. Let me see. Do I have any boys here? Uthman and Tariq. Do we have Ismail? I don't know. Maybe Ismail another. Maybe.
I don't think we have Ismail in this class.
Yeah, I think in another class. Yes, because I know Ismail is one in an area, a village area, and I thought he would be able to answer me. Tariq, do you have a dog at home?
No, I never had a pet.
You don't have pets. Do you live in
Nope.
Do you live in the countryside or in town?
Town. But I lived in the countryside for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Yeah, Uthman, are you here, Uthman?
Yes, doctor, I'm here.
Yeah, do you have a dog at home?
No, doctor.
You don't keep dogs in the farm if you have a farm?
No, doctor. There is people there. No need for dogs.
I mean, if you have sheep and goat, you must have a dog.
No, doctor. We mustn't.
Keep
Some people have.
Sheep and
Some people have, but
if you live in an area, mountainous area, in a desert area, you need to have a big dog to protect the sheep and to protect the goats and so on. And really here the writer wants to say that sometimes if you have a dog like this, really the dog can talk to you, can tell you stories, and you can understand your dog completely. And the dog can, here they say that the dog can communicate, tell you exactly what he wants to tell you. That's the writer here, what he says. Because the dog was not happy with its owner, who could not tell him or would not tell him. There was no communication between them. The dog was not happy with its owner because the owner is using him as a slave, not as a friend.
actually, doctor, I think, in my opinion, all animals understand human or understand people.
Yes, absolutely. I really believe that. I really do. I
Doctor,
really do. I have,
Can you believe that when you go with any animal, any kind of animal, if you were angry, they feel that you are angry, so they afraid of you. But if you were happy and in good situation, they feel relaxed and they come to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have myself, when I was a young boy, we had in our village, we had, cows and sheep and dogs and you know, donkeys, and you could talk to the cow, for example, and tell her, come back. Just say, come back. You know, you just call to the sheep or to the dog or to the cow if it's going into something you don't like it and it's far away from you. You can call her. You say, hey, come back.
And she understands you.
Honest to God, the cow would come back and the sheep would come back because she or it or he, I don't know, they exactly understand. You say, hey, don't do this, come back. Honestly. And it's very far, by the way, it's not next to you. You could be sitting like this and you see your sheep or your cow going into somebody else's maybe property or something. You say, hey, come back. Especially many farmers give names to their animals and you call her by her name and she will come back. The only cow you say, for example, whatever you say to her by her name, she will come back. The other ones, they will not come because you did not call them by name. Do you understand?
Yes, doctor. Actually, here in Oman, we call the goats by name.
Yeah, exactly. I'm
Yes.
saying this is really amazing. And here really a story is saying, this dog is not happy with its owner because it's treating it in a terrible way. He said, like a slave. Otherwise, he would have told him. The dog would have told him something to tell him not to do this and not to do that. You see? So really, this is amazing. Again, to go back to instinct. And I think this is what the writer really wants to say about that. Notice, the dog made no effort to communicate its apprehension to the man. It was not concerned in the welfare of the man. It was for its own sake, and it yearned back toward the fire. Notice, you see, the animal, you know, was not concerned. As if to say, if he wants to kill himself, let him go and kill himself. But for me, as the dog, I will not kill myself. You know, this is, of course, to put yourself in the shoes of the dog. You say that the man, it was not concerned with the man. Notice, it was concerned for its own sake and to go back to the fire. But the man whistled and spoke to it with a sound of whiplashes. You see, this is it. The only language he spoke is with the whiplash, and dogs don't like whips. You see, this is it. He's saying he was treating him like a slave and beating him all the time like a slave, and the dog was angry with him, and the dog really does not like him. He was obeying him only like a slave would obey his master. And notice the dog is saying, I don't want to leave him on his own. He's my master and I will go with him. You see, the dog is decent enough to go with him, to say, I will follow him. He's my master. Again, notice the dog swung in all the man's heel and followed after. Really, here the writer is, you know, to you really here is to show you the real, as I said, really the amazing exaggeration to say what language men and animals speak here, really. As I told you, really, in my real life situation, I have myself, honestly, I have tried this many, many times. And it is true. Animals speak to their owners, and they really follow exactly what they say. especially for example in circuses. You know, in circuses, how horses and even lions and horses, all kinds of animals, they train them and they started to understand what they say to them. And you say hello, they raise their hands and they shake hands, and you know, they understand. And really, this is the idea here to say, you know, the writer is exaggerating this just to tell us that people have to follow their instincts sometimes. And here, of course, more, I think, I want to go back to check where he wanted to build the fire. Here, I think in this section, notice, all this the man knew, the old timber of Sulphur Creek had told him about it. The previous fall. And now he was appreciating the advice. You see, the idea here to say that once he was other people, that when you have a weather like this, don't go out. And of course, the idea that he did not listen, because as I say, he was a stubborn man who thinks that he can do it. And notice here again the idea about the question that he was given advice. He was given advice before, but he didn't listen. And now, of course, you can see here, to build the fire, he had been forced to remove his mittens. And the fingers here. Again, I think this is really lovely to read all this carefully, to see how he started to build the fire, you know? And I think, you know, I'll read some of this. Okay. Now notice the blood of his body recalled before it. The blood was alive like the dog, and like the dog, it wanted to hide away and cover itself up from the fearful cold. So long as he walked 4 miles an hour, he pumped with blood willy-nilly to the surface. It ebbed away and sank down into the recesses of his body. The extremities were the first to feel its absence. His wet feet froze the faster, and his exposed fingers numbed the faster, though they had not yet begun to freeze. Again, here he wanted to build the fire. Again, I think the way he really did this, notice in paragraph. The fire, okay, notice, toes and nose and cheeks would only be touched by the frost, for the fire was beginning to burn with strength. He was feeding it with twigs and size of his finger. In another minute, he would be able to feed it with branches of the size of his wrist. And then he could remove his wet foot gear, and while it dried, he could keep his naked feet warm by the fire, rubbing them at first, of course, with snow. The fire was a success. You know, this is the first example of building the first fire. He was safe, as you can see here, the narrator really emphasizing this. He remembered the advice of the old timer on Sulphur Creek and smiled. The old timer had been very serious in laying down the law that no man must travel. And this is really the idea that the advice he was given, but he didn't follow. No man must travel alone in the Klondike after 50 below. You should not travel alone. Again, this is it. You should never travel alone. Yeah. Really, in dangerous areas, dangerous areas, dangerous circumstances, dangerous conditions. Never, never travel alone. And that's the idea. And I think this is absolutely true. True. Well, here he was. Our friend was alone, and it was wrong. And that's why he died. He died because he was wrong. And he did not. Well, he was, meaning here he was alone. And he had the accident. He had the accident. When you have an accident and you are alone, you will die. He was alone. Again, notice the narrator, how many times he's stopping this by semicolons. Where was? He had the accident. He was alone, and he had saved himself. Okay, all right. The old timers were rather womanish. Some of them, he thought. Look at this. What a terrible thing to say. Those old timers were rather womanish. What's that? I don't like this, but I mean, yeah, sometimes they say, you know, we men sometimes say things really, we think that we are strong and we are powerful and blah, 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 blah. And if things, weakness and other things, we say, this is women's stuff, you know? And I think it's a terrible thing that men sometimes say. All a man had to do was to keep his head and he was all right. You know, this is his idea. All a man had to do was to keep his head and he was all right. Any man who was a man could travel alone. But it was surprising. The rapidity with his cheeks and nose were freezing, and he had not thought his fingers could go lifeless in so short a time. Lifeless they were, for he could scarcely make them move together to grip a twig. They seemed remote from his body and from him. When he touched a twig, he had to look and see whether or not he had hold of it. The wires were pretty well down between him and his finger ends. You see, his hands now completely dead. So that's of course the idea that he was wrong to travel alone. You see, this is the question here. Really, this is his arrogance. This is his absolute arrogance and crazy idea. All a man had to do was to keep his head, meaning to decide, and he was all right. Any man who is a man or who was a man could travel alone. That's absolutely wrong. Totally wrong. Absolutely wrong. You need someone with you. You need someone with you. You need a person, a woman or a man. You need somebody with you. Maybe you need more than one. Absolutely. And here really, that's again one of the mistakes, and I think the writer said it clearly. And of course, especially when the fire was killed by the snow, and I think it was here, you know, the idea that he could not, start the fire again. And you can see this here in the next few paragraphs, how the fire was killed by a drop of snow which fell over it, and everything killed the fire. Everything was dead. And he started and wanted to build another fire. Notice here, you can see this in the next. Man was shocked. It was as though he had just heard his own sentence of death. For a moment, he sat and stared at the spot where the fire had been. Then he grew very calm. Perhaps the old timer on Sulphur Creek was right. If he had only had a trail mate, he would have been in no danger now. You see? If you had a friend, if you had a trail mate who could build the fire, you see, your fire is dead now. You need somebody to help you. Yeah. Well, it was up to him to build the fire over again. And this second time rather must be in no failure. Even if he succeeded, he would not, and so on. Really, this is amazing. He could not do it. He tried and tried and tried to do it, right? And you can see a lot of these details. Again, really to show you again how he thought in a crazy way. He wanted to kill the dog to warm his hands by the skin of the dog or by the body of the dog. You know, it's really amazing. Of course, is I don't know really here. It shows really the question I want to show you really, because I can't read everything, but please read every sentence here because it's lovely. Especially here, I want to show you when here at the idea that he wanted to kill the dog. Here, notice the sight of the dog put a wild idea into his head. You see, this is the time to kill him, to take his skin. He remembered the tale of the man caught in a blizzard who killed a steer and crawled inside the carcass and so was saved. He would kill the dog and bury his heads in the warm body until the numbness went out of them. Then he could build another fire. He spoke to the dog, calling it to him, but in his voice was a strange tone, was a strange note of fear. That animal, who had never known the man to speak in such a way before, something was the matter, and its suspicious nature sensed danger. It knew not what danger, but somewhere, somehow, in its brain arose an apprehension of the man. It flattened its ears down to the sound of the man's voice, and its restless, hunching movements and the lifting and the shiftings of its forefeet became more pronounced. But it would not come to the man. He got on his hands and knees and crawled toward the dog. Unusual posture again excited suspicion, and the animal sidled menacingly away. Wow. I think this is a lovely, again, section here to say that the animal knew. The animal immediately knew that the man is going to kill him. And that's why he ran away. The man sat up in the snow for a moment and struggled for calmness. Then he pulled on his, by means of his teeth. And here, really here, you can see the dog, of course, notice here, let me show you, where is it here? How, yeah. Yeah, so his erect position in itself startled to drive the webs of suspicion from the dog's mind. And when he spoke, again, notice, where is it? The dog rendered its customary allegiance and came to him. As it came within reaching distance, lost his control. His arms flashed out to the dog, and he experienced genuine surprise when he discovered that his hands could not clutch. As I said, he had forgotten for the moment that they were frozen and that they were freezing more and more. All this happened quickly, and before the animal could get away, he encircled its body with his arms. He sat down in the snow and in his fashion held the dog, while it snarled and whined and struggled. But it was all he could do, hold its body encircled in its arms and sit there. He realized that he would not kill the dog. There was no, with his helpless hands and so on. Anyway, the idea really is danger, really very, very tragic. As I said, the dog ran away, and the man, step by step, really started to die, and he couldn't even survive all this. Notice, all the dog, and all the time the dog ran at his heels. When he fell down a second time, it curled its tails over and 4 feet and sat in front of him, facing him curiously, etc. The warmth, again, really to say that because, as I said, originally he wanted to kill him, but it ran away. And then when the dog sensed that he could not kill him, this is really, again, another amazing thing about curiosity. Again, notice facing him, curiously eager and intent. The warmth and security of the animal angered him, and he cursed it till it flattened down its ears. And this, again, time, you could see a lot of this kind of really clash and terrible anger in the man's head, that he wanted to kill the animal, but he could not, because, as you can see, he had no power to do it, and so on. Notice at the end here, the conception did not come to him in such terms. His idea of it was that he had been making a fool of himself, running around like a chicken with its head cut off. Such was the simile had occurred to him. Well, he was bound to freeze anyway. And of course, he said, and he might as well take it decently. With this newfound peace of mind came the first glimmering of drowsiness. A good man he thought to sleep off to death. It was like salting the anesthetic. Freezing was not so bad as people thought. There was lots worse ways to die. Well, really, this is rubbish to say this, to say, yeah, I can die I can face death in this way, I think, the whole idea really, to be honest with you, really, it's his mistake. He was really bad. He pictured the boys finding his body next day. Suddenly he found himself with them, coming along the trail and looking for him. And still with them, he came around the turn, the trail, and found himself lying in the snow. He didn't belong with himself anymore. And here, of course, the narrator is suggesting how maybe the idea that they would find him dead, and the dog, of course, was alive. Again, notice here when he said, of course, in his mind, "You were right, old boss. You were right. Again, he said horse or boss. Right. The man mumbled to the old-timer of Sulphur Creek. Then the man drowsed off into what seemed to him the most comfortable and satisfying sleep he had ever known. The dog sat facing him and waiting. The brief day drew to a close in a long, slow twilight. There was no signs of a fire to be made, and besides, never in the dog's experience had it known a man to sit like that in the snow and make no fire. Twilight drew on, its eager yearning for the fire mastered it, and with a great lifting and shifting of 4 feet, it whined softly, then flattened its ears down in anticipation of being chidden by the man. But the man remained silent. Later, the dog whined loudly, and still later, it crept close to the man and caught the scent of death. This made the animal bristle and back away. A little longer it delayed, howling under the stars that leaped and danced and shone brightly in the cold sky. Then it turned and trotted up the tail in the direction of the camp it knew, where were the old or the other food providers and fire providers. You see, this is it. The dog, you know, it's really funny, but amazing, I think, to see here how the whole thing is in sharp contrast between the animal and the dog. And the dog, as we see here at the end, was in every sense, was sensible and more really apprehensive about things. Well, this is it, ladies and gentlemen. I think that's it for today. Please try to